A recent census shows that of people aged 20 to 29, 44% of them are living with their parents, which raises a whole lot of questions. And here to help us sort through them with some practical advice from her book, Secrets to Parenting Your Adult Child, is licensed professional counselor and trained life coach, Nancy Williams. Now, Nancy, like I said, you have come just in the nick of time for me, okay? Because I know this is just exactly where I am living. So first, an obvious question, how do you parent adult children?
I think you first have to begin by understanding your child individually. Each child's unique. In fact, I use the phrase, one size doesn't fit all when it comes to parenting, because it doesn't. We really need to consider each of our child's strengths and their vulnerabilities and their struggles and the path they're choosing or not choosing and their maturity rate, because that varies, you know. And then understand your role as a parent is to let go of that mother knows best hat and put on your coach's hat and recognize that you can't be directing them and controlling them anymore. You have to loosen those reins and shift that control over to them. And that's a transition process. And it's not always easy for parents, and it's not always easy for our children as well. I have 2 adult children, so I know I've walked this path and counseled a number of adults and young adults too who struggle. And it's an exciting time, but it's challenging too.
Do you think the fact, and I mean, it's not just here, but we've talked, girls on the couch, about the men in Italy. Over half.
Oh, yeah.
Over half.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
I get this now. Over half of the men, 25 to 35 in Italy, are still home with mama. And they're trying to change the laws to get them out. But, you know, we've come into a child-centered parenting culture.
Yes.
The helicopter parent. All over every breath of that child. Not in every home, but by and large. Is this contributing to the statistics we're dealing with right now?
Oh, I think it is, and I think that we want the best for our children. Of course, parents do, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with helping your child. But sometimes we get so protective of them. We don't want them to fall down and skin their knees. We don't want them to struggle. We don't want them to do without. So in our desire to protect them and provide for them, sometimes we go overboard and we don't let go and give them the opportunity to cultivate that independence. And sometimes for parents, we struggle because our identity is so wrapped up in them. It's like, you know, I'm a mom, I'm a soccer mom, I'm a coach, I'm, you know, the bus driver, I'm this and that. And when my children leave, now who am I and what do I do with my life? And I'm not ready to let go of that yet. So hold on as much as I can.
But when does that transition happen? I mean, as in, do you do it when they're 18, where you're a parent and you give them direction, you say, okay, at 18, you're out? Or do you do that after university when they come home? Like, how do you transition those roles? Because I think that must be difficult as a parent to do.
It is, and I think it's a process over time. I don't think it's about a date on a calendar or an accomplishment at school. You know, I think once again, you have to look at each child's needs individually, you know, and their maturity rate. There are some children at 18 are very mature and able to make wise choices about managing a budget and managing their finances and managing their time and cooking and doing their laundry. And there's some children at 25 and 26 that are still struggling, you know, to get that concept down and to really take on those roles that come with being an adult. So I think as parents, it really involves us listening to our children, observing them, understanding them, and then helping them develop a plan. You know, and I think parents need to take the lead in that. Some parents wait for their children to say, okay, I'm ready to leave now. Well, some kids are not going to do that as long as they've got good food at home and somebody do laundry and pay the bills. You know, what's the hurry? I love it here. You know, so parents do need to take the lead in saying, let's talk about how you can take charge of your life and how you can step up. I want that. I know you want that too. Let's talk about how and when we're going to make
Nancy,
that happen.
You've hit it on the head there for me, because that is really hard to know. That's hard to do. Like, when do you sit down with them and say, okay, you're an adult now and you're going to need to think about getting an apartment, or you've got to think about doing your own laundry. That's something that I'm struggling with right now, because honestly, I don't mind doing my laundry for our 2 adult sons. Our daughter, of course, is married and moved out, but our 2 sons are almost 19 and almost 22. And, I'm doing laundry anyway. I might as well
Do they know
hers
how
too.
to
But
do
they
it?
do, yeah.
And see, there's a good point. As moms, certainly we want to do for our kids. And as family members, we love doing things for family members. I love it for my sister-in-laws and, friends all come. So there's nothing wrong with that. But what we have to be careful of is when we do so much out of our desire to want to do for them.
To be the adored mother.
Right. We
Yeah.
rob
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
of the opportunity to learn. Every
Yeah.
time you do your child's laundry, you take away from them the opportunity to learn that. Do you remember when your children were little and you taught them how to ride a bicycle, or when you learned how to ride, the parent held on the back and said, honey, I've got this bicycle. Yeah, I'm holding on. But at some point, you knew you had to let go, and you knew they were going to fall down.
I remember my first time badly.
And they looked at you and they cried and said, how could you do that? Our instinct is to rush over, hold the bike, and say, I will never let it go again. I am
Back
here
to
with
three
you.
wheels,
Yeah.
back to
Because
three
I
wheels.
know
Boy, this is so good.
But we knew we
Yeah.
had to let go. And we
Yeah.
knew when they fell, we had to go over and say, I'm sorry you fell. You know what? I know you can do this. Now I want you to get up and I want you to try it again. So when they're doing the laundry and all the colors are bleeding, you say, what can you learn from this? And let's try it again.
And let me say, as a woman who's dated, different men over the years of my singlehood, I never appreciated the men whose mothers coddled them, because they were looking for that for me. They wanted me to be everything for them. And I'm like, no, I'm looking for a man that can stand on his own 2 feet.
Right.
So in the case of your sons, you're
set
not,
them
you're not
up.
actually
Uh-oh.
enabling them to be good husbands. You're enabling them to be a dependent husband, who
Right.
isn't an equal to that woman. And nowadays, women are not looking for traditional roles by and large. We're looking for men. Like I wouldn't mind doing my husband's laundry, but if he was unable to do his own laundry, I would not respect him. And men want respect,
Yeah.
Well,
right?
that's just it. Yeah, the boys know how to do their laundry. I mean, when I'm away, they obviously have to if they want anything clean.
Right.
But I guess, and you said something earlier about, well, it's how I'm identified as a mother. It's my identity is to be able to do this for them. But, and I read in your book, you said, when our adult children are going through changes in their lives, usually that's a signal that parents are going through changes in our lives too. And we've got to let ourselves change as well as letting our children change.
Right. It's not just their roles being defined, it's ours as
Yeah.
well, right? And we need to see that we're not directors, we're not in charge of our children now. We're to come alongside and coach them, give them the wisdom from our experience, but not in a directive way, but just in a way that says, here's some information, I just would like you to consider that. Asking the powerful questions that spurs them on to think for themselves. Remember when that child rode that bicycle by themselves and didn't fall, they looked at you and said, look, Mommy, I'm doing this all by myself. When they have that pride of accomplishment, it's big for them. And it's big for us. And we know that that's what we're set up to do, to teach them and then give them those wings to take off on their own and to learn how to fail and how to pick themselves up. A lot of children don't know what to do with failure.
And is there just a little bit of consciousness that someone bigger has a plan for that child? And actually we relinquish that child
Yes,
to God?
and that is so key. And of course, as mothers, we think mothers know best, and of course we know best what's best for our children. But we do have to come to that place of exercising our faith in God and recognize that while we love our children, God loves them more than we do. And He has a plan that may not be our plan, and we have to be willing to set that aside
Absolutely.
when it's different and accept that He knows. And when we feel like we're on the sidelines and we feel like we're so powerless to help them, in the midst of whatever crisis they're dealing with, we have to remember that God's right there. He's right there alongside them.
And I think too, it's a question of, it goes right back to boundaries, and this is true of all human relationships, is what is really love? And I can only relate this to being a boss because I'm not a parent, but as I've been a boss, it's like I've come to realize that never talking to people about the areas they need to improve is not love.
Yes.
I want them to like me, so I never confront them. They never grow as an employee and they never
Right.
become good. And I think as a parent, it would be the same way, in the sense that, you want them to like you, so you're loving them. You think that you're loving them in the best way for them, but you're loving them in the best way for you.
Boy, that's true.
So what is really love? Love is enabling someone else to be the best they can be, And I think
It's
that's a
speaking
painful
truth,
thing.
right? It's being
It's hard,
honest.
though.
It's being respectful. It's being honest, and it is communicating to your children, I love you, and I want the best for you, and I have some concerns I want to share with you because I'm asking you to think about them. Ultimately, you're in charge of your choices, and you're responsible for the consequences. I can't protect you, and I can't fix them for you, but here's some concerns I have, and it's giving them that information and asking them to consider. That's doing that respectfully, as you would an employee, as you would a friend. You know, if you have a friend that you really love, you sit down and say, hey, I want to talk to you about something. I want to tell you something. You don't get in their face directing or demanding, but you share that information because you love them and you want good for them long term. And sometimes you risk that they may be angry with you in the moment, but you know it's for their good.
And Nancy, I love how practical your book is, because you not only tell us everything you've been saying, but you give us some practical help. You give us even questions to ask your children to help them move from point A to point B to point C. Like if they're looking at how to achieve a goal, you ask them, what kind of action plan do you need to accomplish this? Like you have practical help here where a parent who really doesn't know where to begin can actually say, okay, this is what I need to ask. You know, how are you going to accomplish this? And then how can I support you as you do this?
See how you give a roadmap for the big talk.
And you see how empowering that is? Our tendency is to parents, when our child says, here's my situation, our tendency is to jump in and say, here's what you need to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you'll be good. But when we say, what do you think? And you may have to just pause and let them stumble around a little bit, because they may look at you and go, well, I don't know. What do you think, Mom? And you breathe and you say, well, we could talk about some options. What are some possibilities? As we talk about that. And you continue to ask the questions, because that way they take ownership in the process and they realize they're coming up with the idea, and you're just kind of directing them on the course by asking the questions that guide them to the place where you really want them to be.
I love that you say in the book that you move from your mother knows best, you know, persona to your coach persona. You're a coach now. You're not a mother telling your child what to do because this is the best option. You're a coach saying, okay, let's think this through, and you pick what you think, and then I will support you, and I'll give you my input if you want it. If you want it.
Doesn't mean that we have to agree with them. It doesn't mean that we have to like what they're saying. And if we don't, there may be times that we need to say, you know, I see it differently. I would take a different path. I have some different views. But child, ultimately it's your life, and I need to respect your right to make your choices and deal with the consequences, whatever they'll be. And I'll pray that you'll get some wisdom to make good choices.
And pray with your child too. Like really come together and say, okay, we're going to pray about this together, because as Moira said, God knows what He has in store for that child. And so we just need to get with His mind and His plan for them.